Greetings, everyone. It is Monday, June 8th, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, here for the representation station. I am joined by Roger Scott, back from his world travels. Roger, how was Portugal?
Portugal was awesome. I kind of didn't want to leave. It's a good thing we left when we did. The temperature increased, but while we were there, the weather was awesome. Took a nice road trip. We stayed in Lisbon most of the time. Took a road trip up north, wine country, the beach. It was beautiful. It's awesome. Loved it.
Nice. You have some Portuguese for us?
Bom dia.
Ah, there you go. Good day, sir. Good day.
Obrigado. I know how to say thank you. Obrigado.
Obrigado. Okay. Um, All right. Well, greetings, everyone. It has been a while since we've had Roger with us, but we're happy to have him back. Um, we have Drew Cox is going to be joining us next week on the 17th. Matt Beat will be joining us as well for that. Paul Rosenwig on the 22nd. And we've got another special guest who we're still booking. We're looking to get that confirmed. I think it's going to be the week after. Um, okay, I want to start this week with a little. I'm going to show you an email that I received from Gabe Fleischer. And it's not as though he sent this specifically to me. He said he sent it to everyone. And what he is arguing for is a fourth branch of government, a formal fourth branch of government, basically made up of, I'm going to call it like permanent bureaucrats, is basically what he is arguing for. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen without giving away any. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can open this in his. Yeah, read in the
Just
app.
like
There we go.
non-commissioned officers or something.
Yeah, it's not exactly clear to me because he doesn't actually say, what should happen, other than we should have a fourth branch of government. And basically, it sounds like he's proposing that we need a constitutional amendment. So I'm gonna share this. Here we go. I have it opened up, not on my email. Okay. So here's the article. You can see that, Roger? Yeah.
Oh yes.
Okay. So Gabe has interviewed me. Jeff has sat down with him for lunch. He's a smart guy, a young kid. He's got a Substack. He's writing for the Free Press. He's writing his own stuff. He's in DC. He's there all the time. He's talking to a lot of people. So I think he is a hard thinking person. But Gabe, this one falls a little short, and here's why. He goes through and he starts by talking about Tom Keene, who just won the Republican nomination.
Right.
But here's the problem: Tom Keene has missed the last 104 votes,
And has not been
and
seen in public in over 3 months.
right,
He claims some sort of health issue, and all will be made plain. He's like, "Patience, Watson, all will be revealed."
yeah. So he issued his first statement here on the matter. He says he will be transitioning from virtual work to in-person work within a matter of weeks, which he pledged to be completely transparent as to the nature of his medical condition.
There
Until
you go.
then, nothing. He's gonna keep receiving $174,000 a year to do nothing. So pretty wild. And this is he's not the only one, right? There are others. And what Gabe goes on to say is like, Congress doesn't have any mechanisms to hold these people accountable. So what we need is a permanent branch of bureaucrats to hold our Congress and the executive branch and the judiciary all accountable. And he looks
Inspectors
to
General.
yes, and he looks to Taiwan to say this is what we need. And so this is my response to you, Gabe, and then I'll let Roger chime in. Whether or not a fourth branch of government is a good idea or a bad idea, a constitutional amendment requires a Congress to pass that constitutional amendment. Either they're calling a constitutional convention or they're proposing the amendment. Well, bad in, bad out. You are expecting our current Congress to create a piece of legislation that is going to stand the test of time in the same way that our Constitution has, and I don't think they're up for the task. I think that before you get anywhere close to anything like this, you have to have an uncapped House of Representatives, so you have the chance at getting something that is permanently accountable. Second, you don't actually need this to address the problem that you raise in this article, Gabe. You start off by saying these representatives are not accountable basically to the people, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, if we had an uncapped house, they would be accountable to the people, right? The problem is right now they run in such large districts that they don't really have to be accountable to the people. They are accountable to the party, and the party's happy apparently to let them not vote, right? They can count on that not vote. An uncapped house specifically fixes that problem. Now, is the idea of an insulated fourth branch of government of inspectors general that can, you know, oversee the misdeeds of or the sexual exploits of, members of certain branches of the government? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe. But you know who's going to fund that? Congress.
Congress.
And those bills are going to originate in the House of Representatives. So, frankly, each of these branches of government are beholden to the first branch of government, which is our Congress. In the inspectors general, frankly, if a future, even if you get a constitutional amendment passed, if the future Congress doesn't want to fund what they're doing, they're not going to. And that is the ultimate check. And so the check on all of this is the spending power, the taxing of spending power. And who holds that ultimately? It's the people electing our representatives. So I appreciate what you tried to do here. And he started off, he says, as America approaches its 250th anniversary, I will be writing a series of pieces, taking a step back, looking at our political system and ways to improve it. This morning, I share my biggest picture idea for a political reform that could increase trust and transparency in government. Dash Gabe. So, Gabe, you've written about uncapping the House in the past, and I got to say it blows this fourth branch idea out of the water. We have had basically independent agencies. The Supreme Court had recognized independent agencies for a long time, and that did nothing to give us a voice in Congress. That did nothing to stop the corruption that has been running rampant. Maybe there were some checks as a result of the permanent bureaucrats, but in a lot of ways, the permanent bureaucrats were the corrupt pieces of government. It was the Bayer and Monsanto goons that left Bayer and Monsanto to go work in government, or vice versa, or they did it multiple times, in and out, in and out, in and out. Because frankly, they can voluntarily leave and go and get a big paycheck at the agencies at the entities that they regulate. So the fourth branch is not the check. The check is the purse. I look forward to reading your next piece about uncapping the House. And again, I'm not saying that a fourth branch is not a terrible idea. It just doesn't work if we don't have a legislature fully accountable to the people. And the way to do that is to uncap the House. Go ahead, Roger.
Well, no, I'm thinking about sort of the purse issue on a smaller scale or a lower level. I'm thinking about docking the pay for every vote they miss, that sort of thing. Now, a lot of members of Congress couldn't care less because they got plenty of cash, right?
Right.
So that's not necessarily going to help. But there are others, probably it is important to them. Unfortunately, those are the ones who are not likely to miss votes anyway because they need their job. They want to do a good job, so on and so forth. So I was just cooking this idea of docking pay for missed votes in my mind. I don't think that's workable either. But that's, as an accountant, that's where my mind went. A financial penalty, a payroll penalty.
Well, and so, the most recently passed constitutional amendment, which was originally proposed in the Bill of Rights, prevents Congress from increasing its pay in the year in which they sit. I think it would be reasonable for the current Congress to say, dear future Congresses, we're hereby passing a law that, if you miss more than 50% of your votes, that is not for, a public and documented medical reason, you lose your pay, right? Or you lose 50% of it. I think that's reasonable. But again, a future Congress could just undo that, right? Unless we have a constitutional amendment, they could undo it. But my bigger point is, even if we have a constitutional amendment, a future Congress can basically defund whatever they want. And the only real remedy at the end of the day is to vote the bastards out, right? The whole idea of representative government is that you can vote the bastards out. If you can't vote the bastards out, then you're going to wind up with corruption, right?
Right.
And our founders understood that, and that it's the reason George Washington, the only time he spoke during the founding debates, was in favor of fewer constituents per representative, because that closeness, that ability to vote somebody out if you felt as though they were being corrupt, that was the check.
And also,
and we've lost that check.
Since you bring up George Washington, let's not forget the first veto ever issued by any president in this country was a veto on a bill that someone wanted to dilute representation. He only did 2 vetoes in his term. The second was a fine point of relative cavalry units in the army, something esoteric like that. But his first one was to stop somebody from watering down representation.
Yeah. I applaud all thoughts about reform as we approach the 250th anniversary, and so I'm not trying to be too hard on Gabe. But something that we harp on here is the first reform that is required is a House that is responsive to the people, because otherwise the reforms that you get are not going to be what is actually promised. They're going to be a facade for something else. And that is because, again, I don't know how a person, or, it's kind of like going into business with somebody that you know is corrupt, and the corrupt person being like, oh, but this time it's going to be different. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that's correct, right?
The scorpion and the frog.
Yeah. It is, anyway, so I again, not a horrible idea. It's just who implements it and who pays for it, right? Because ultimately we're paying for it through our representatives, who theoretically are going to be passing a budget bill. So, maybe he didn't start with uncapping the House because he thinks somehow this is like more likely to gain traction, but it requires a constitutional amendment. So I don't know. I was just kind of taken aback by it. So I wanted to start there. I don't know. Any other thoughts on a permanent fourth branch to help solve all of our problems?
Well, I haven't read the piece. You made some reference early on in this discussion about Taiwan, pointing to Taiwan as an exemplar. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah. Okay. So here I'll come down here and we'll highlight this. So the idea of independent officials reviewing the rest of government isn't novel. It is embedded in the logic of inspectors general, even if these figures haven't been independent in practice, creating the need for this reform. You can also see this understanding elsewhere around the globe. In Taiwan, for example, there are 5 branches, or yuan, of government: the executive yuan, the legislative yuan, the judicial yuan, the examination yuan, parentheses, which oversees entrance into the civil service, and finally the control yuan, to which citizens can submit complaints about government misconduct, and which can investigate public officials and ultimately censure them, or initiate impeachment proceedings against them, and propose other remedies to discover discovered wrongdoing. So he doesn't really go much further into it than that. And yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just state the obvious. I'm not sure that Taiwan should be the example for America's republic.
Right. And this comes back to the same problem, though. As long as the legislature is responsible for funding everything, then the legislature essentially has, I shudder to use the word, trump card.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It is.
So, and I mean, to whom would this fourth branch or fifth branch be accountable? Would we be electing inspectors general as well? Would that be on the ballot? Because otherwise,
No,
they answer to somebody we elect, and we're back in the same shit.
yeah. No, he proposes appointment by the president, confirmed by the Senate. So they're like permanent cabinet secretaries.
That's not a branch of government. That's executive.
Right. I mean, I agree. The idea is, I think, a constitutional amendment that says they're not terminable by a future president. So once they get appointed, kind of like judges, they have lifetime appointment powers. But again, like the judiciary, that becomes politicized. And so, I just don't see it
Well, it doesn't have
I
to be
don't see it
lifetime.
actually solving anything.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be lifetime. It could be term limited in the same way that people talk about, Supreme Court justices having 18 years, for example, or there's various proposals out there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it would be kind of like the Fed chairman, right? The cycle's so long it outlives a single presidential term. These would be much longer than that, but the point is, a president wouldn't be able to, dismiss them at will, which is what
Right.
we need to avoid.
Yeah. Um,
I mean,
I have a lot of thoughts.
it's a worthwhile thought exercise, a worthwhile thought experiment. I agree, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's a successful recipe.
Yeah. The I've been reading this book, G Man, and it's all about uh, the rise of Herbert Hoover's and the FBI.
Mm.
And he's a very controversial figure, and
Oh
in
yeah,
part, he was Republican, but he flourished under both Democratic and Republican presidencies,
because he had
and it
dirt
was
on
really
everybody.
yeah, well, and it was really FDR that I mean, really created, with the New Deal, this idea that we're going to have a kind of professional, permanent bureaucracy, and but that's kind of what Hoover was. He was born and raised in D.C. His brother was a permanent bureaucrat. I mean, he basically never did anything other than be a permanent bureaucrat. And you know, we have long. I think there's long been this notion that a permanent bureaucracy is going to it's going to steward this giant ship of economics into the right place. And my observation is just that th- obviously the oversight has been so poor that it allowed people like Herbert Hoover, who were these beautiful permanent bureaucrats, to just be totally corrupt and playing all the sides, totally racist, genuinely, maybe in some cases trying to do good, but on the whole, just trying to, line his own pockets. He was, big into Hollywood. He loved all the films about himself. I mean, he's an egotistical maniac. And to think that that we're going to have a fourth branch that is not responsive to the people, and that's going to solve our problems, I just, I think it's
Yeah.
wrongheaded. We have to have people who are no longer reality TV stars, right? Essentially, you know, in the 30s, after the Permanent Apportionment Act, that's when Hollywood got a grip on our national politics, on the national zeitgeist. They, started putting out certain, types of films, certain types of propaganda at the behest of people like Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover. I was saying
Mhm.
Herbert earlier, J. Edgar.
J. Edgar.
They're not actually related, believe it or not. I mean, I guess they're distantly related, but they are not close kin. He, you know, this is 100-year problem that we're dealing with, and the solution is not more of the same. I guess is what I would say to you, Gabe. And I hope that you reconsider. Okay, I think that's enough of that. Um, so the other thing that I want to talk about is material misrepresentations. Uh, and I think, Roger, because you are a CPA,
Yep.
you are going to have an idea of what that word means, or
Oh,
I guess
yes.
it's a phrase. So in your world, what is a material misrepresentation?
Uh, well, a misrepresentation is something that is not true or accurate. In the
Mm,
context of financial statements and accounting, we always work within, we always have the issue of materiality in our mind.
mm,
So you uncover an error, but it's for $6.50 for a company that has 50 million in revenue. The six dollars and
right.
fifty cents is immaterial. Now,
Mm,
if you find 1,000 of them and it all adds up to 45 million, then you've got a material misstatement, even though the individual pieces were immaterial themselves. So
mm,
accountants spend a lot of time thinking about materiality. Basically, is the juice worth the squeeze? Right? Is the
mm,
remedy worth the cost?
mm,
Um, Simple example, something you do inventory, you got to count nuts and bolts. Nobody wants to count nuts and bolts. It's a loser game, right? What you do is you weigh 10 of them and figure out the average weight of a bolt, and then you have a forklift bring the whole bin over, set it on the thing, right? Set it on the scale,
yeah.
see how much it
Yeah.
weighs, and divide it by, and that's how you do it. Now, are we certain that we got the exact right number of bolts from that bin? Absolutely not. It's probably misstated, but it'll be immaterial.
Mm. It so the reason I bring this up is because I think the word representative or representation is it's like linguistically broad, right? Like you have electoral representation, but then like in the world of law or in the world of finance, there are also representations that are made. So the other context that you see representations being put under a fine tooth comb is in SEC filings, right? So with any publicly traded company, um, or in any offering circular for any investment, um, a material misstatement of fact is essentially securities fraud, right? So
Yes.
the if you have a company and they say, we think we're gonna, make $1 billion next year, and they knew that they were only gonna make, 100 million, that's a material misstatement of fact, right? Because for the reasons you just said, it's material because it's not small, right? It's a big deal.
Hmm.
It's a 1,000% off, and it's a misstatement because it was wrong, and they knew it was wrong, and that's a representation. Um,
Right.
and it,
Well, here's another thing from
go
the
ahead.
accounting world that we use to protect ourselves. Right. Every time
Mm,
if you're doing an attestation engagement, that's an audit or a review or something like that, you're going to make the company sign a management representation letter. They're representing to you, the CPA, that they have abided by all the laws and all the covenants and their debt agreements and this and that and the other. And there's 4 pages of representations they have to sign off, because if I do an audit and it comes out later that there was something there, I didn't catch it. I said, well, they represented that they were not doing that. So, you know,
yeah, absolutely. And I put something in all my fee agreements. I say if you, well, I don't say a false representation. I say if you are not 100% truthful with me, I reserve the
mhm,
right to fire you. Right. So
right.
if a client ever makes a material misrepresentation to me, I reserve the right to fire them immediately, because as an attorney, I can't represent somebody well if they lie to me, if they make misrepresentations to me. And this is this is this may sound somewhat pedantic, but it's not. And the reason it's important is because this is what your representative is supposed to do. Your representative is supposed to be what? Honest. Like that is the fundamental characteristic of a representative, of a representation, that it is
Yes.
true. Because otherwise, it's a misrepresentation. So, the one of the reasons I wanted to kind of go through this exercise with you, Roger, is I think we need to start calling our representatives misrepresentatives.
Hmm. I don't
And
disagree.
they like it's I think there's like a couple play on words there, right? Especially if like for the male ones, it's like a little bit of a jab, like they're like you're misrepresentative.
Okay.
But then also, but then also, that they are just making material misrepresentations of fact all the time. That's constantly what they do, and we have a
Speech and
collective
debate
action
clause.
problem, right? But not even outside of the floor,
Yeah.
right? They're making material misrepresentations uh, on the campaign trail in letters to their constituents. They are not only materially misrepresenting facts, they're also omitting material facts. So the other piece of this, right, is omission. Um, and I'm sure in your world you also deal with this, right? If you say we made $1 million, but you omit the other $1 million that you made, that is
Hmm.
also a material misrepresentation of the truth,
Yes.
right? An omission can also be a lie,
Right.
and our representatives do this all the darn time.
So, and they claim speech and debate clause even when they're on the campaign trail, right? They don't have to be on the floor of Congress to claim that they were doing it within the
I
context
think
of
they
their
do.
role as an elected. I think they can claim as long as they're doing it within the context of their role as an elected representative. I think they can claim it all they want. Otherwise, we
I,
should be suing them for defamation left and freaking right.
Well, no. So okay. I think you're complaining two things. So when our representatives are on the campaign trail and the attack ads are going between them and their opposing parties, so when the Supreme Court has ruled that when you're a public figure, you have to show not just that the statement was false and material, but also that the person had malicious intent, which it is a higher standard to overcome. And there have been some successes in defamation lawsuits around this, but in general, it's just not worth the dollars, because ultimately the only people that win in those are the lawyers, right? The
Right. No, I get
lawyers,
it. I
yeah,
misspoke. Defamation is not the word. We should sue them for fraud. Sue them for
yeah.
fraud.
Well, and I want to. I'm gonna let me do a little search here. Does the speech and debate clause protect U.S. reps while not on the House floor?
By the way, your video is frozen on my screen anyway.
Okay. Well,
I
that's
hear
good to
you
know.
fine.
Okay. Oh, we've got a couple people in the chat. Let's see. Hey Jamal. What's everyone's views on pushing for insular territories voting reforms to press the uncapping issue? So I assume he's talking about like Puerto Rico and the Northern Mariana Islands and American
Guam, yeah,
Samoa,
all that.
Guam. Yeah, and I think so kind of like targeting California, Texas, and Florida probably makes sense because people there are the least represented. I think that makes sense, right? There are people in those territories should be upset. I would say the one problem is that there are not that many of them. As for there are not that many people living in those territories relative to the rest of the U.S. population. But
Right.
if we could get everyone in Puerto Rico chanting "Uncap the House," that would be awesome. So I think yes, and if you know anyone there who has clout, let us know, and we'd love to be in touch. Okay, so this AI model is agreeing with me. The speech and debate clause does not provide blanket protection for U.S. representatives or senators for everything they say or do while not on the House floor. Its scope is tied to legislative acts within the deliberative and communicative processes of Congress. So it's not to a location alone, but it basically
It's a
they
more
can only
narrow role, right? It's not their
right
role as a legislator. It's legislative
right.
work.
It's like if somebody was talking about the Epstein Transparency Act, right, but they were doing it outside of the actual passage of the act, like not on the floor, I think that would be covered. Like if they're talking about specific legislation.
Mhm.
But if but if a average representative is saying just a bald faced lie about a person who's running against them, that is not protected by the speech and debate clause, but it is protected by the fact that we don't know that they knew it was a lie when they said it, right? Which is required for the maliciousness standard, right? We have to
Okay.
show that they knew it was a lie when they said it, right?
Hmm.
And so this is, you know, thinking about kind of like an intentional tort versus a non-intentional tort. So this would be like negligence versus, um, you know, an assault or battery, right? So
Or attacking property purposefully versus doing it accidentally. Yeah.
correct, yeah, or an intentional infliction of emotional distress versus a negligent infliction of emotional distress, or fraud versus negligence, right? So I
Hmm.
intended to misstate the numbers. I knew what they really were, and I scratched it out, and I wrote something else. Versus, I genuinely thought that's what it was, and I was just wrong because I'm bad at math.
Hmm.
And so proving that somebody knew that they were wrong when they said it is harder, right? And you'll find in a lot of these like political attack ads is if you really like drill down on what they're saying, it is just like they've got a team of lawyers and they're cleverly saying things that are just on the side of being not quite, maliciously defamatory. But so in this last
Not just
primary
lawyers.
elect,
They got
oh yeah,
psychometricians and psychologists, and they got all kinds of people writing that crap. And then the lawyers have the final word.
yeah. Um, so there was a recent Montana House race. So this is not the U.S. House; this is the Montana House. And there was a gentleman by the name of Brad Barker who is running for the House district where my law firm is located. He's a great guy. He's a veteran, and he's a Republican, but he's pretty. I mean, I wouldn't actually say he's moderate. He's definitely, right of moderate, but he does not toe the Trump line, right? There are things that he says no to, and that's BS, and that's not what I am. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to represent my constituents. Well, man, the Montana Freedom Caucus and a bunch of outside money came in and spent a ton of money, and they sent out all these flyers. And I had people sending me flyers about exactly this, right? These attack ads, and they're just like, "How is this legal? How?" It's just because they want to go after his opponent. And the funny thing is, it wasn't actually his opponent sending it, right? It's the outside PACs, right? So it's these
Right? Of course.
entities that exist kind of in the ether. And so this is the other issue. So if a PAC sends out attack ads, well, who do you sue? And if you are successful, does the PAC have any money to go get them? Right. Well, I would be willing to bet that when a PAC is really when everything's on the line on a very important race, and they go after somebody just bared teeth and really crossing the line on defamation, I would be willing to bet that that PAC has no money after
Y-
it's done with
Right.
that campaign season. So even
They
if you
spend it
go and
all.
get yeah, even if you go and get that, you're going to have to attack them individually. So you got to pierce, a corporate veil. I mean, there's just layers of problems with it. It's a nightmare.
Yes.
I mean, it really is.
Uh,
It's a problem, and it is a problem all the way down to the very kind of even the smallest races. But the answer to that is, I'll just tell you, Brad Barker won his primary by 65%. Why? Because people paid attention to that race, and he got out there and he pounded doors. And his district is small enough that he could do that, and people got to see through the BS mailers that everyone received 10 of. Right? It
mhm.
didn't matter because in a district that small, knowing the guy meant more. And
Or
so
or your neighbor knows him, or your sister
exactly,
knows him, right? You've
exactly.
got a point of reference that you can trust, even if you don't know that cat.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And so, I just to me, it was a very for me it very much solidified something is that all the nasty rhetoric in the world does not win in a small enough district. And this is reason number 3,000 that we need
307. Yeah.
to that we need to
Pick a
uncap the
number.
house, right? And you know if we want a reset of the vitriol, stop letting it work, right? If it stops working, then people will stop using it. And the way that that stops is, I think, by uncapping the house, because that's where all this is originating. All this vitriolic rhetoric, most of it is occurring in these house races. There's
Hmm.
some of it happening at the in the Senate races as well, and there certainly is an amount of it happening at the presidential level. But it's getting tested every 2 years in these house
Yep.
races. Every 2 years, all the psychologists and all these paid bounty hunters, they're testing that stuff on the public in all 50 states in these primary races and then in the general. And so if we want to get away from that, that's where it has to be fixed because that's where it's happening. Um, so on the topic of material misrepresentations, well, I want to pause there. Roger, you got anything you want to add to that, or thoughts on material misrepresentations?
No, I mean, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk about fine points of defamation law and malicious intent and so on and so forth, yeah, we need to uncap the House because no matter what other particular governmental reform you support, your odds of success improve when we uncap the House. But as soon as we uncap the House, we need to go back into our legal statutes and find a way to give things more teeth. Uh,
Yeah.
our enforcement of laws is not strenuous enough to stop the bad actors from doing their bad actions.
I was discussing with a client today the American rule of legal fees. So in the United Kingdom, if you win a lawsuit against somebody else, you recover your attorney's fees as part of your damages.
Yep,
And I think for a lot of people, that's kind of intuitive. It's like, well, of course, that's part of my
it should
damage,
be.
right? Well, America, you may remember, threw off the tyranny of the British system. And although we adopted some parts of their legal system, we decidedly rejected that piece of it. So, under the American rule, you do not recover your attorney's fees unless there is a specific statutory grant under state or federal law to recover those attorney's fees, which are kind of few and far between, or you have a contractual provision that says the loser pays the attorney's fees. And you will see that provision in, funnily enough, almost every contract you will ever
Yep,
review has that provision. Why?
I see it
Because
all the time.
it 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 actually is very helpful. And so, to your point, what I would suggest is if somebody is found guilty of defamation, or especially of a malicious def- defamation, give the attorney's fees. You would put so much more teeth into that law if the people making the defamatory statements were going to be paying attorney's fees, because that's where most of this goes. Because the problem with defamation cases is, how do you prove damage? So for instance, Roger, you and I are say you and I are we magically live in the same district, and you and I are running against each other in a race for the U.S. House, and you're running as a Democrat and I'm running as a Republican, and I put out all these ads saying nasty things about you, and you put out all these ads saying nasty things about me, and most of them are untrue. And so uh, you win, and I say I'm gonna sue you because this one thing that you said was 100% wrong, right?
And the
Well,
harm you suffered is losing the race. Yes.
right. Well, right. And so what are my damages? Well, I actually am leaving a more lucrative career to go be a public servant. As so, like, how, like, what is the actual dollar number of the amount that I've been damaged? Well, there often in a defamation case, it's impossible to prove damages. This is like one of the key problems with defamation cases is, like if you get into a car accident, you lose an arm, there's an actuarial table somewhere that says, that arm was worth, $197,000 over the course of that person's, 20 years of remaining of expected life.
Yeah.
We don't have an actuarial table for, the value of a lie being spread, and it's really hard for a judge or a jury really to wrap their head around. Like, well, I don't know, like, here's $50,000, right? I mean, so like defamation cases, like often, like they vary wildly. I mean, sometimes people get crazy big numbers. A lot of times it's like nothing. And so you're risking, in order to take something to trial, you're risking, say, $100,000 of legal fees to potentially recover nothing, essentially,
Yep.
right? Like you basically get a pyrrhic victory where it's like, well, I won, and so now you all know this thing that this guy said about me was not true. The other kind of confounding thing about defamation trials is that in the trial itself, you're basically promoting this lie that's been told about you, right? You're
Hmm.
arguing, you're like repeating this lie in order to defeat it, right? It's like, this thing is not true. It's like, we, in order to prove that that thing is not true, you have to keep saying that thing, that thing, that thing. Well, that thing ends up sticking in people's heads, and so there's a lot of psychological research on this. It's basically like, the easiest way to beat a lie is to just not talk about it. Okay. It's like, just ignore it entirely. Right. Trump is very good at this. Right. He lies all the time.
Yep.
People also, anyway. So eh, my point being,
He
I
so
think
much so doesn't
if,
talk about it. He gets up and walks and leaves the interview so he doesn't have to talk
yeah,
about it.
exactly. It's just like, oh yeah, like Epstein is like, I think y'all need to talk about something else. Let's move on. I think the people are ready. Um, yeah. So I think if we were going to have a federal law around this, in, say, in congressional races, it should be that, if a candidate proves that another candidate said a lie about them and they did it intentionally, or any person on their staff or any consultant, right? Whoever did that voluntarily is liable for the attorney's fees if it gets proven. And I guarantee you that that would also have a huge impact in the amount of lies that are told in our primary and general campaign seasons.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
it would also, it would
I would love to see
stifle
that
some speech,
standard.
but it would be great.
Should be standard tort reform across the whole legal framework, right? If you bring a case and lose, you're going to be on the hook for the other party's legal fees too.
Yeah. And the argument against this, right, is that, well, people make accidents, right? I mean, people screw up, and just because you screw up doesn't mean you should be on the hook for somebody else's, $1,500 an hour attorney, right? That's not reasonable. If my damages are only $50,000, I should not be forced to pay $300,000 in attorney's fees.
Well, you're not
And
forced to. You publicly apologize and say you were wrong.
yeah,
Then
well,
you pay nothing.
right, yeah. I mean, and that could be an out. I mean, there could be like a mandatory
Mea culpa.
mediation in
Public
this.
mea
Yeah,
culpa.
yeah,
Put it in the newspaper like the obituary or the property sale notices have to be recorded in the newspaper.
yeah. Um, okay, so on the topic of material misrepresentations or misstatements of fact, there are a couple people who come to mind who do this a lot. Trump obviously being one. Um, the other one is Elon Musk. He
Yep.
famously got sued in Delaware Chancery Court for saying that he had funding secured for taking Tesla private at $420 a share, and he's been in a lot of hot water around potential material misstatements of fact. I will say, also, he makes a lot of predictions about the timing of a lot of his products that have been wrong, and he's been in a lot of hot water about that.
Yep.
He also has been mostly right about most of the large things that he said he was going to do, even if he was wrong in the time scale. And and the reason I bring this up is he posted this video. He was online with this podcaster, and the podcaster, because Elon Musk has recently launched a plan to build AI data centers in space. And the podcaster is just like, this is crazy. You can't service GPUs in space. Make it make sense. And he goes through this whole analysis where he says, well, you get 5 times as much sunshine when you're outside of our atmosphere. The solar panels actually are less expensive to manufacture because you don't have terrestrial weather to deal with, and it's never dark in space. And that was kind of counterintuitive to me. I was like, well, it's always dark in space. What are you talking about? And the idea is, if you put these, I guess, at a polar, like on a polar orbit, there's never nighttime, right?
Right.
They're always facing the sun.
They're always
And
facing
so
some star. Yeah, some star
Right.
somewhere. There's always light.
There's always light. And so, his point was, as a result, you don't need batteries, right? If you build these correctly, essentially you can have server farms in space running on solar, 100% solar, that do not need batteries. And so as a result, you basically cut the cost in half. And the podcaster is like, well, AI data centers, like, only like 15% of the cost is electricity, and so most of the cost is the GPUs. It seems like that's where the shortage is. And he was like, what he said was, it's not the cost of the electricity; it's the fact that you actually can't get it, right? That there just isn't enough electricity. Like, they're talking about building a terawatt or multiple terawatts of capability for AI data centers. And the reason I bring this up is, AI data centers are obviously a very hot topic right now. But what was fascinating about this is, he's talking about building like terawatts of data centers in space. Well, that's more than the entire U.S. current electrical output combined. And his point was, even if you wanted to build, behind the meter electricity, you still are going to be interconnecting with the electric grid, because sometimes you're going to be using electricity, you want to sell it. And he was like, in order to do that, it's going to take over a year to have any type of interconnection agreement. The utility industry is a bunch of monopolies, right? That they're controlled by state-run PUCs or PSCs, and they're
Right.
impossible to deal with. And I he may be wrong. The reason I want to bring this up is, I think he may be wrong about the time frame. He was saying that basically he's going to have this done in like 3 years. So that that might be a material misstatement of fact. Maybe not
Vaporware.
done in 3 years. Yeah. However, there's been a lot of people who've bet against Elon Musk doing things, and they have all largely been wrong, or lost a shit ton of money betting against him. And essentially, everything that he said that was going to be done has been done, with the exception of, I would say, true AI full self-driving vehicles. I
What
currently
about
own
Hyperloop? He said
Well,
we were going to have Hyperloop.
Okay. I don't
I
know.
could probably come up with
Yes.
some others if I sat and thought about it, but I get your point. He's been
Yeah.
extraordinarily successful with Tesla, SpaceX, and maybe Twitter. Jury's still out.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay, so Jamal has said Patrick Boyle debunked the space servers. It's never going to happen, and he put it in the IPO docs to juice the price. Yeah. So I had read that also, Jamal. So I found the arguments against it pretty convincing until I listened to Elon like really drill in on this. And I could be wrong. So I don't have any type of inside knowledge other than what is publicly available. But when I watched the interview, I came away saying, I think that there may be more there. And he's already putting things in space. If he can drop the cost of launching a bunch of stuff into space, I actually don't know why you wouldn't. It does kind of. I think it makes some sense. I think at the end of the day, it does make some sense. Um, so I think he may be wrong about the time. I think it. I think it might happen, and I think that it is another it solves some of the terrestrial problems. Like a lot of people are very worried about data centers in their backyard and all the water usage to cool. Cooling is not a problem in space. So I think in a lot of ways, kind of like fully electric vehicles, like it's something that benefits people along all sides of the spectrum. But you know, uh, like it is. Well, the I would just say that Elon Musk's political chops are not as good as his engineering chops.
Well,
Um,
and so it solves terrestrial problems, but there's other problems with doing it in space. I mean, for starters, there's a fair amount of space junk up there already, and then there's always asteroids and other particles. So the idea of cheaper solar panels, I don't know how they'll be cheaper. I think they need to be harder because they're going to be hit by stuff going 360,000 miles an hour. So that's one issue. And then how many of these things is he going to put up there? He's going to blanket the sort of the sky around us. So now there's more space junk. Okay, it's not junk at the moment, but it's in the way, and other stuff's going to hit it, and there's more of it up there. I see additional problems from implementing this plan. New problems.
well, the good news is when you make a material misrepresentation of fact as a publicly traded company, as an officer of a publicly traded company, and when you get sued and you lose, I'm pretty sure, at least under Delaware law, the successful suitor has a statutory right to attorney's fees. And so
Yeah,
I
he don't
promise
care.
you,
He's the richest man on the
well,
planet. He don't give a shit. He'll pay whatever you want.
yeah, well, fair enough. Um, okay, Jamal is not a fan of Elon. Hyperloop, fleet self-driving cars, solar shingles, AI maids. Elon lies, and like a
Like a
broken clock
broken.
is right once or twice. I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's been right more than once or twice in pretty profound ways. But I'm not saying he is not. He does not. He's not hyperbolic. I would say, but what is more important, I think, from my perspective, is that he is wrong about where he is directing rage on the internet, right? So I think in a lot of ways, the problems that Elon faces in over promising and under delivering on the engineering front are, I would say, relatively modest in comparison to the kind of rage that he's trying to instill in people online that is not directed at a positive outcome or an
Right.
actual reform.
And his sweeping
Um,
claims of what Doge was going to do or what Doge was doing, which was totally fabricated. None of
yeah,
it was real.
well, I mean, I don't know that none of it was real. I think all of it, it wound up was subject to um, the the whims of Trump, and that kind of butted head with reality of the fact that Trump wanted all of his buddies to get their pockets lined, and that
Hmm.
was somewhat incompatible with eliminating fraud. Um, yeah, uh, I, I did. We could do a whole, and maybe we should. I mean, we could go into more of this. I mean, one thing that's interesting in part, I think, about the whole Elon Trump falling out, right? If you remember when he basically got kicked out of Doge or out of the administration, he went on Twitter and said, the reason Trump won't release the Epstein files is because Trump is in the Epstein files.
I remember,
I mean, I think that was kind of true. And then he deleted it.
which makes
But
it even
now,
more likely to be true.
right, exactly. And then, but whatever this recent trip to Beijing, Elon is on Air Force One allegedly, and so what I see is, I mean, you're the richest man in the world. He is playing the most dangerous game, and I don't, it's like he's not putting people's effort towards an actual actionable outcome that resolves the problems. And he claims to be a first principle thinker. I have been chirping at him on X now for over 500 days, and he has yet to issue a single statement about uncapping the House. So the reason for all of that, omissions, right? But Elon, you are omitting the most important thing, which is an actual actionable outcome for the rage that so many people are feeling and that you seem entitled to instill in everyone. And the answer is to uncap the effing House of Representatives. And the longer you refuse to comment on this, the more clear it is to me that you are lying by omission. And so you can prove me right or you can prove me wrong. And the rest of the world is going to be here to judge. And what I would say is, if you want to rehabilitate your image, Elon Musk, it could be by doing the singular thing, right? Give the people their House of Representatives. And a lot of people will say he's never going to do it because he doesn't want to be investigated, because he wants control, because he's a billionaire, trillionaire. And you can prove them right or you can prove them wrong.
He's part of the oligarchy. That's my position. He has no interest in expanding the House because that would be a blow against oligarchy, and he's in the club. So,
And also, he is mentioned in the Epstein files. It doesn't appear that it looks like most of the connections were Epstein trying to get him to come to meetings, trying to get him to show up to things, and he didn't. And so, I guess what I would say, Elon, is, if you don't have anything to hide, then giving a little bit of control back to the people means we're not going to have a civil war, which means you can keep selling cars and solar panels. And I actually, I've read almost every book that's been written about him, and I genuinely think he went all in on Tesla and SpaceX, not knowing some things, but genuinely wanting to help humanity, wanting us to thrive in the long term. Very different than Peter Thiel's outlook or philosophy on life. And so, although I think he has been misguided, I do think he acts from first principles. But he has been making political calculations or moves that do not ultimately serve that purpose, because if the people can be lied to some of the time, but they can't all be lied to all of the time. Eventually that falls apart. And we're seeing it right now, right? We're seeing the degradation of our society. At least I see it at every turn. And so I just think it's important to reconsider, that bad people can do good things, good people can do bad things, but defective structures are going to consistently produce bad outcomes. And it's attracting bad people, and it's convincing good people to do bad things. And if you want to change that, you have to go back to first principles and you have to look at the structure. And that's what we've been talking about, all the darn time. And that is ostensibly what Elon Musk believes in. He believes in first principles thinking. And so, I challenge the people to go for it.
I have one comment. You said something. You made I'm not even sure what the correct grammatical term is, but you said, Elon, if you've got nothing to hide, then do this. And my response to that is, no one achieves the level of wealth he's achieved without having something to hide. Prove me wrong.
I mean, yeah, it's difficult to prove a negative.
Yeah, I know. I'm being a smartass, but that's my position. You know, inheriting hundreds of millions and then turning it into a billion. Okay, I can see that over a lifetime. But to go from where he started to what he has now with just ideas and a squeaky clean background, I don't buy it.
Let's see. Jamal says uncapping the house would have meant Elon would not have been given all the grants he and his companies benefited from and tried to remove enemies through Doge. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that he wouldn't have gotten grants with an uncapped house. Maybe, and I think that that would be fine. And I don't,
Well,
I don't.
wasn't there a strike against him and when he was in Doge because there were investigations that got scrapped and some other stuff? He effectively improved his life by being involved with Doge for the few months he was and getting
Well,
some
I
pesky
mean,
stuff off his plate.
I think being involved with the administration and donating a bunch of money meant that he got a bunch of investigations dropped. I don't know that he effectuated that through Doge,
Hmm.
but I could be wrong.
Well,
And
one
I
way
mean,
or
one
the
of the
other,
things.
it sounds bad. It sounds dirty.
Well, God willing, we're going to have a country in 10 years, and there will be books written about this, and we'll actually maybe have some sense of fact. Because we don't have a House of Representatives that can investigate any of this. Um, okay,
Well, we're
we
over time
have
now. How long are we supposed to go?
no. This is it. We're done. We are done, good sir. It was great to see you, Roger. Everyone, again, next week we'll be at a special time or a special date. Instead of a Monday, we will be on Wednesday, the 17th, and we will be at our normal time. So next week, not Monday, but the 17th at 6 p.m. Mountain, we will have Drew Cox, who is a congressional candidate in Indiana, and we're going to be joined by Matt Beat. So it should be an interesting, lively discussion, and I will look forward to seeing you there. Have a wonderful day. Any last words from you, Roger?
Say the cat's last name again. Drew what?
Cox. COX.
Okay. All right.
Do your research.
Yes, I have in-laws named Cox.
Okay. All right. Well, until next time, good night. God bless, and go get yourself some quality representation.
Yeah, quality representation. And take out the trash. Bye.